The US government and the majority of the US people decided that the 9/11 attacks could not go unanswered. The Taliban in Afghanistan were protecting Al-Qaeda, the organisation believed to have conducted the attacks. The primary goal was security. Before any action took place in Afghanistan, Operation Noble Eagle mobilised around 35,000 of the National Guard, the Air National Guard, and the Coast Guard to protect American soil. Operation Enduring Freedom was initiated to combat US-defined terrorist organisations and their allies. The US government tried to make it clear that this was a war specifically directed at these groups, not at Muslims in general. The US government was not expecting to intervene in Afghanistan and therefore did not have an existing plan of operations. With Afghanistan being a landlocked country without good road and rail infrastructure, supplies would be brought in by air. In order to achieve this, the coalition obtained permission to use the Kashi-Kanabad Air Base, shortened to K2, in Uzbekistan. Transports would be flown into Europe and then transferred into smaller aircraft to land at the short K2 runways. Combat planes would take off from the British overseas territory of Diego Garcia and carriers in the Arabian Sea. The first attacks would be on Afghan air defences to ensure aerial operations would be unimpeded. The next step was to keep special forces on the ground to support coalition allies while being small to avoid inflaming the Afghan population. Leaflets delivered by planes and radio broadcasts were used to clarify US intentions to the Afghan population. As Afghanistan was one of the poorest regions in the world, humanitarian aid would also be sent to reduce civilian suffering and maintain stability. The final phase would be a 3 to 5 year coalition effort to create conditions in Afghanistan that would prevent the resurgence of organisations like Al-Qaeda. In the north, the coalition, an international force of the US and its allies, worked with the multi-ethnic Northern Alliance who opposed Taliban rule. If the Taliban concentrated, they would be vulnerable to aerial attacks guided by coalition soldiers. If they dispersed, they would be overwhelmed bit by Northern Alliance troops, who brought the majority of the manpower. The combination of local allies with coalition special forces and air support was incredibly effective. Despite being outnumbered, 6 provinces had been captured and nearly 10,000 Taliban fighters were dead in under 2 months. However, the south and east of Afghanistan were different, as there was no prominent anti-Taliban faction to work with. Furthermore, securing Afghanistan would require the support of the majority Pashtun ethnicity that lived in the area. Hamid Karzai and Gulaga Shuzai emerged as Pashtun anti-Taliban leaders for the coalition to work with. Karzai had been building an anti-Taliban network for the previous 5 years and had realised that he would need coalition help to defeat them. He was well aware of coalition capabilities and its importance. When out of supplies, Karzai had telephoned the coalition for assistance, and his men were amazed when they dropped food, weapons and ammunition right at his location, just in time to defend against a Taliban attack. He began to form a militia army of Pashtuns. Though many were eager to receive weapons, this army was undermined by the commitment of its troops, as many were only interested in protecting their communities. 200 men from the 75th US Rangers captured a forward airfield 50 miles southwest of Kandahar. At the same time, special forces were being inserted into the capital of Kabul. The town of Tarankot, at the heart of the Taliban movement, was seized by the local people. The Taliban would return to recapture it. The forces defending the town numbered only several dozen US soldiers and Karzai's Afghans, while hundreds of Taliban were arriving by convoy from Kandahar. Using laser designators, the troops on the ground guided airstrikes on the approaching trucks. Civilians gathered to watch the battle, though fortunately none were hurt. A couple of trucks made it unnoticed around the flank and started a firefight within the town. Unable to use their overwhelming firepower, the coalition forces were in a grave situation. However, at this critical moment, the local people had taken their own initiative and fought off the Taliban attackers themselves. Shazai's force would attack Taktapol and cut off Taliban supply lines from Pakistan. While Shazai negotiated to try to capture the town without bloodshed, the Taliban repositioned their troops to surround him. Coalition air power was called in to destroy the Taliban force, and the town was abandoned. The next target was Kandahar, the largest city in Pashtun majority land. The fighting was fierce here, with well-trained Al-Qaeda forces stopping the offensive. A week-long bombardment ensued and inflicted heavy casualties. Meanwhile, in Bonn, Germany, the UN decided to nominate Karzai as the chairman of the committee that would take over from the Taliban. Eventually, the Taliban commander surrendered to Karzai in exchange for governorship of the area. With most of the Taliban strongholds having fallen, they retreated towards the Pakistani border. One of the sanctuaries here was a valley called Tora Bora, which housed a complex of caves and defensive positions. From here they could retreat into Pakistan into friendly territory independent of Islamabad's control. The roads were not blocked due to the risk that soldiers would cross the border or engage with Pakistani troops. For 17 continuous hours, airstrikes hammered the Al-Qaeda and Taliban positions. The coalition's Afghan allies negotiated, and their honour dictated that those who surrendered arms would have free passage. However, the US could not accept this and intervened. The fighting continued, and the Afghan militia was slow to make progress. They retreated back to their camps lower in the valley every day, allowing their gains to be recaptured in the night. On the other hand, this meant that coalition snipers were sure that any movement in the area at night was not friendly, and they inflicted heavy casualties. Eventually, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban withdrew, but not before Al-Qaeda troops held a zealous defense covering their retreat. By December 2001, most of Afghanistan had been wrestled out of Taliban control. Coalition forces and their Afghan allies had been mightily effective, and defeated forces that significantly outnumbered them, while suffering far fewer losses. The next objective in Afghanistan would, however, be the most challenging: the creation of conditions to prevent the resurgence of Al-Qaeda. Furthermore, Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, though materially weakened, were still at large. For the US, justice had still not been achieved for the tragic events of 9/11, and the effort to destroy Al-Qaeda would continue.